As night fell, Michael Thompson, a renowned cardiac surgeon at Yale New Haven Hospital, was returning home after an exhausting day at work. He had chosen to drive himself, enjoying the rare silence and the nearly empty road, leaving behind the hustle and bustle of the large hospital. The night air blew fresh, and Michael, lost in his thoughts, drove absent-mindedly along the route leading to his house in the suburbs. However, his direction and thoughts took an unexpected turn when he spotted a solitary figure on the roadside, struggling against the cold night wind. Michael's heart tightened as he saw the elderly woman, her frail form battling the relentless gusts. Without hesitation, he slowed down and gently pulled the car over to the shoulder. Lowering the window, he felt the cold night air invade the warm interior of the vehicle. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need help?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. The elderly woman turned slowly, her deep blue eyes meeting Michael's. There was something in that gaze, a mix of ancient wisdom and indescribable sadness, that made the doctor catch his breath for a moment. Without responding, the woman began to sing, her voice trembling but oddly melodious, cutting through the night's silence. "Beautiful love, my beloved, you are my light, my life." The words hit Michael like a lightning bolt. It was as if time had stopped. That melody, he knew it. From somewhere deep in his memory, the recollection of his mother singing that very song to him as a lullaby surfaced. How could this stranger know such an intimate, personal song? "Ma'am, please get in the car." "It's very cold out here," Michael said, his voice trembling slightly, not just from the cold but from the emotion welling up inside him. The elderly woman gazed at him for another moment, her eyes seeming to pierce the doctor's soul, before silently nodding and entering the car with slow, careful movements. The interior of the BMW was filled with a silence laden with mystery. Michael looked at his passenger, noting the details of her wrinkled face, the gnarled hands resting on a colorful shawl in her lap, the posture that spoke of a long and not necessarily easy life. "Where would you like to go?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the storm of emotions and questions swirling within him. The woman merely smiled, an enigmatic smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her lips moved, but instead of a response, what came out was the melody again, low and hypnotic. "Beautiful love, why leave? Stay, don't make me suffer." Michael swallowed hard, feeling a lump form in his throat. There was something about that song, that voice, that woman that touched strings long silenced in his heart. As he guided the car back onto the road, he couldn't help but wonder what mystery he had gotten involved in, and how this night would change his life forever. Michael kept sneaking glances at his mysterious passenger, whose profile was intermittently lit by the passing streetlights. The silence inside the car was almost tangible, broken only by the gentle purring of the engine and the steady breathing of the elderly woman. "Ma'am," Michael said, his voice breaking the silence like a whisper in an empty cathedral. "How do you know this song?" The old woman turned slowly, her eyes glowing with ancient wisdom in the glow of the car's dashboard. A mysterious smile played on her wrinkled lips, but no words came out. Michael felt a shiver run down his spine, a mix of fascination and apprehension. "You know," he continued, trying to fill the void with words, "my mom used to sing this song to me when I was little. It's such a distant memory, almost forgotten." The old woman gave a slight nod, as if she deeply understood what Michael was saying. Her gnarled fingers absent-mindedly caressed the colorful shawl in her lap, a gesture that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 memories. Michael opened his mouth to ask another question, but was interrupted by a deafening crash. The car jolted violently, causing him to lose control for a terrifying moment. With his heart racing, he managed to steer the vehicle to the shoulder, the tires screeching against the asphalt with a sharp whine. "Oh my God," he exclaimed, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. "Are you all right?" The old woman remained unmoved, as if the incident hadn't affected her. Her eyes, however, seemed to shine with renewed intensity in the darkness of the car. Michael let out a shaky sigh. "It must be a flat tire. Don't worry, I'll change it quickly." He got out of the car, the cold night air hitting him like a slap. As he walked around the vehicle, he found that the rear right tire was completely deflated. With quick, efficient movements, honed by years of practice in emergency situations, Michael began changing the tire. As he worked, his mind wandered. Who was this mysterious woman? How did she know the song from his childhood? And why did he feel such a deep, inexplicable connection with her? The metallic sound of the wrench echoed in the silent night, punctuated only by the occasional distant wail of a siren, a reminder of the city that never truly slept. Michael felt sweat trickle down his forehead despite the biting cold. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he finished changing the tire. Exhausted and a bit dirty, Michael stood up, stretching his aching back. "All right," he said, turning to the car. "We can continue our—" The words died in his throat. The passenger seat was empty. The woman had vanished without a trace. Michael stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief. He looked around frantically, searching for any sign of the elderly woman in the darkness of the road. But there was nothing except the wind whispering through the trees and the occasional passing of a distant car. "Ma'am," he called out, his voice echoing in the empty night. "Ma'am, where are you?" Only silence responded. Michael felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night's temperature. He got back in the car, his hands shaking as he turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life with a soft growl, but the sound felt strangely hollow without the mysterious presence of the old woman. As he drove back home, Michael couldn't stop glancing repeatedly at the now empty passenger seat. Reality and fantasy seemed to have merged, leaving him in a state of confusion and awe. The song Lindo Amor echoed in his mind, a ghostly reminder of the surreal encounter he had just experienced. The full moon still hovered over New Haven like a watchful eye as Michael finally parked his BMW in the garage at his East Rock home. His hand still trembled slightly as he turned the key to shut off the engine. For a moment, he sat in the darkness of the car, trying to process the surreal events of the night. With a deep sigh, he got out of the vehicle and walked to the front door. The porch light automatically turned on, bathing him in a warm glow that contrasted sharply with the strangeness he had just experienced. "Michael!" Sarah's soft voice greeted him as he entered. She appeared in the hallway, her blonde hair tied in a messy ponytail, wearing a flannel robe. Her green eyes, usually full of joy, were now clouded with concern. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Michael let out a nervous laugh as he hung up his coat. "If I tell you what happened, you'll think I'm crazy." Sarah moved closer, wrapping him in a comforting hug. Her arms were a safe haven, anchoring him to reality after the storm of unreality he had experienced. "Darling, I'm here for you. Tell me what happened." Sitting in the cozy kitchen with steaming cups of chamomile tea in front of them, Michael recounted the strange events of the night. The solitary figure on the road, the familiar song, the mysterious disappearance. Each detail flowed from his lips as Sarah listened intently, her eyes widening as the story unfolded. When he finished, a heavy silence settled over them. Sarah reached across the table, intertwining her fingers with his. "Mike, you had an incredibly stressful day. Maybe it was just a dream while you were driving." Michael shook his head, frustrated. "I know it sounds crazy, Sarah, but it felt so real. The song, it was exactly how my mom used to sing it." Sarah bit her lip, clearly torn between wanting to comfort her husband and being incredulous about the story. "Well, what if it was a spirit?" she said with a playful smile, trying to lighten the mood. "Or maybe you had a supernatural encounter." Michael laughed, but the sound was hollow. He stood up and walked to the kitchen window. The moon illuminated the backyard, casting strange shadows that seemed to dance with the gentle wind. "I don't know what to think, Sarah. All I know is something extraordinary happened tonight." Sarah joined him at the window, wrapping him in another embrace. "Whatever it is, we're in this together. Tomorrow, with the light of day, everything will seem clearer." That night, lying beside Sarah, Michael couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the wrinkled face of the mysterious woman or heard the haunting melody of Lindo Amor. Turning in bed, he wondered if he would ever uncover the truth behind that enigmatic encounter. The first light of morning found Michael already up, preparing for another day at the hospital. As he walked to the garage, a sudden thought made him stop. What if... Opening the car door, he froze. There, on the passenger seat, was a colorful shawl. The same one the mysterious woman had draped over her lap the night before. "Oh, Sarah," he shouted, his voice trembling with emotion and shock. "Sarah, come see this!" His wife rushed to the garage, still tying her robe. What's wrong, Mike? What? She stopped when she saw the shawl. Michael picked up the fabric with trembling hands. It was soft to the touch, the colorful patterns seeming to dance in the morning light. This was with her, the mysterious woman. Sarah touched the shawl, her expression a mix of astonishment and worry. Mike, this is incredible and frightening. Michael nodded, feeling a swirl of emotions, fear, excitement, confusion inside him. One thing was clear, the mystery was far from resolved, and somehow he knew that his life would never be the same. The morning sun found Michael Thompson restless in his office at Yale New Haven Hospital. The golden rays filtering through the blinds contrasted sharply with the storm of thoughts swirling in his mind. The colorful shawl, carefully folded, lay on his desk as a tangible proof of the surreal events from the previous night. A gentle knock at the door interrupted his musings. "Come in," he said, straightening in his chair. The door opened to reveal a young woman with brown hair and almond-shaped eyes. "Dr. Thompson?" "I'm Emily Baker, your new secretary," she said with a warm smile. Michael blinked, momentarily confused. "Oh, right, Emily. I'm sorry. I almost forgot you were starting today." Emily entered the room, her gaze quickly landing on the colorful shawl on the desk. "What a beautiful fabric, Dr. Thompson. It looks old." Michael hesitated for a moment, internally debating how much to reveal. "It's a long story, Emily. Actually," he paused, a sudden idea coming to mind. "Emily, would you be willing to join me on a little mission tonight?" The young secretary raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Sure, doctor. May I ask what it's about?" Michael stood up and walked over to the window. His reflection in the glass showed a tired but determined man. "There's a mystery I need to solve, and I think it would be helpful to have a witness." The hours dragged on that day. Michael conducted his rounds and surgeries with his usual competence, but his mind was elsewhere, wandering through the dark roads of New Haven, searching for a solitary figure singing a familiar song. When twilight finally arrived, Michael and Emily left the hospital and got into the silver BMW. The night air was crisp, filled with the scent of autumn leaves and promises of mystery. "Dr. Thompson, where exactly are we going?" Emily asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Michael kept his eyes on the road. "Last night, Emily, I had an unusual encounter. We're going back to where it all happened." As they approached the spot where Michael had encountered the mysterious woman, the tension in the car was palpable. Emily fidgeted in her seat, casting nervous glances at her boss, whose hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. Suddenly, Michael slammed on the brakes. "There!" he exclaimed, pointing to a solitary figure walking along the side of the road. Emily leaned forward, squinting to see better in the dim light. "Dr. Thompson, is that Mrs. Anderson?" Michael turned to her, surprised. "Or you know her?" Emily nodded slowly. "Yes, she sells vegetables near the office. But what is she doing here?" They got out of the car and cautiously approached the elderly woman. As they got closer, Mrs. Anderson turned, her blue eyes shining with a recognition that made Michael shiver. Michael Jonathan Thompson, born August 15, 1980, adopted by Jonathan and Mary Thompson when he was just 3 months old, Mrs. Anderson said, her voice firm and clear in the quiet night. Michael felt his legs weaken. How do you know that?" Mrs. Anderson ignored the question and turned her penetrating gaze on Emily. "And you, young lady, should be ashamed. Your plans will only bring pain and destruction." Emily paled, taking a step back. What are you talking about?" The elderly woman turned back to Michael, her eyes softening. "Doctor, beware of temptations. Your loyalty to God and to your wife will bring the blessings you both seek." Michael felt as if the world was spinning around him. Questions piled up in his mind, but before he could voice any of them, Mrs. Anderson began to sing softly, "Lindo amor, meu bem querer, es minha luz, meu viver." The familiar melody filled the night air, wrapping Michael in a web of memories and emotions. He looked at Emily, who seemed as shocked as he was, and then back at Mrs. Anderson. In that moment, under the starry New Haven sky, Michael Thompson knew his life was about to change forever. The mystery that began with a ride on a dark night was just starting to unravel, and he was determined to uncover the truth. The night cloaked New Haven in a shroud of mystery as Michael, with his heart racing, asked Emily to wait in the car. The young secretary nodded silently, her eyes still wide with shock after Mrs. Anderson's cryptic words. "Michael, come with me," the elderly woman said, her voice gentle but firm like the autumn wind whispering through the trees. He followed her, feeling as if he were in a dream. They walked for a few minutes, leaving behind the city lights and entering a quiet residential neighborhood. Mrs. Anderson stopped in front of a modest house, its time-worn facade telling silent stories of decades past. As they entered, the scent of lavender candles and old books enveloped Michael. The soft light revealed walls covered with black and white photographs. His heart nearly stopped when his eyes caught a familiar image. "Is that me?" he whispered, approaching a photo of a smiling baby wrapped in a colorful shawl, the same shawl now resting in his office. Mrs. Anderson smiled, her eyes shining with a mix of tenderness and sadness. "Yes, Michael. This is your story." With trembling hands, Michael took the photograph. How is this possible? Why do you have this?" The elderly woman sat in a worn armchair, gesturing for Michael to do the same. 44 years ago, on a cold night like this, I found a baby in a basket by the side of the road. That baby was you, Michael." Her words struck Michael like a lightning bolt. He felt the world spin, his certainties crumbling like a sandcastle. "But my parents, they never mentioned..." Mrs. Anderson leaned forward, her voice soft but laden with emotion. "I gave you to the Thompsons knowing they would love you as their own. They couldn't have children, you know. You were a miracle to them." Michael struggled to breathe, feeling as though each word from Mrs. Anderson was rewriting his history. Why are you telling me this now?" The elderly woman smiled, a smile full of wisdom and love. "Because you needed to know, Michael. Your journey is just beginning." She slowly got up, walking to a shelf and picking up a dusty photo album. "Here," she said, handing it to Michael, "is your entire story, from the day I found you to the day you graduated from medical school." With trembling hands, Michael opened the album. Each turned page was a revelation, a piece of the puzzle of his life he hadn't realized was incomplete. Photos of him growing up, moments he recognized and others that were completely new to him. I promised myself I would watch over you from afar, ensuring your safety and happiness," Mrs. Anderson continued, her voice choked with emotion. "But now, Michael, you need to know the truth to face what's coming." Michael looked up from the album, tears streaming freely down his face. "What's coming? What are you talking about?" Mrs. Anderson knelt before him, taking his hands in hers. "Your life, Michael, is about to change drastically. You and Sarah, the child you've both longed for, is on the way." Michael's heart leapt. How do you know that?" The elderly woman smiled mysteriously. "There are things in this world, Michael, that go beyond human understanding. But remember, faith and love are the most powerful forces that exist." She stood up, walking to the window. The full moon bathed the room in a silvery light, giving the scene an almost supernatural air. "And as for your young secretary, Michael, be careful. Not everyone has good intentions." Michael felt a shiver run down his spine. Mrs. Anderson's warning about Emily, the revelations about his past, the promise of a future he and Sarah so desperately wanted, everything swirled in his mind like a whirlwind. Mrs. Anderson turned to him, her eyes shining with a light that seemed to come from another world. "Now go, Michael. Return to Sarah. The future awaits." As Michael finally left the house, he felt as though he had lived a lifetime in just a few hours. The weight of the photo album in his hands was a tangible reminder that his life would never be the same. As he approached the car, he saw Emily asleep in the passenger seat. Mrs. Anderson's warning echoed in his mind. With a deep sigh, he got into the vehicle, determined to face whatever fate had in store for him. The days following the encounter with Mrs. Anderson were an emotional roller coaster for Michael Thompson. The imposing mansion in East Rock, once a sanctuary, now echoed with the newly uncovered revelations and secrets. On a particularly tense evening, Michael finally mustered the courage to share everything with Sarah. Sitting on the porch with the cool autumn air brushing their faces, he unfolded the incredible story, his voice trembling occasionally with contained emotion. "Sarah, my love," he said, holding her hands tightly, "there's something I need to tell you, something that will change everything." Sarah's green eyes, always so understanding, widened as Michael recounted the surreal events of the past few days. The encounter on the road, the mysterious Mrs. Anderson, the revelations about his adoption, each detail flowed from his lips like a dammed river finally released. When he finished, a heavy silence settled between them. Sarah, with tears in her eyes, squeezed Michael's hands. "Oh, Mike," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. It's unbelievable." Michael nodded, feeling a huge weight lift from his shoulders. "I know. Sometimes I still wonder if it was all a dream." Sarah abruptly stood up, pulling Michael into a tight embrace. "Dream or not, we're in this together, always." In the days that followed, the couple embarked on a journey of self-discovery. Mrs. Anderson's photo album became a treasure trove, each page revealing a new chapter of Michael's life that he hadn't known existed. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Emily, the young secretary, seemed increasingly nervous around Michael. Her furtive glances and erratic behavior didn't go unnoticed. On a particularly busy afternoon, Lisa, a veteran nurse and close friend of Michael, pulled him aside into a quiet corner of the hallway. "Dr. Thompson," she whispered, her eyes darting around to make sure no one was listening. "There's something you need to know about Emily." Michael's heart raced, Mrs. Anderson's warning echoing in his mind. "What is it, Lisa?" The nurse hesitated for a moment before continuing. "And I heard her in the locker room. She was on the phone. Michael, she plans. She wants to get pregnant by you. She thinks it will secure her future." The revelation hit Michael like a punch to the gut. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The looks, the strange behavior, Mrs. Anderson's warning. Without hesitation, he made a decision. That same afternoon, Emily was called to Michael's office. With a mix of compassion and firmness, he dismissed her, explaining that her actions and intentions were incompatible with the hospital's ethics. Weeks passed, and life slowly found a new rhythm. On a sunny Sunday morning, Sarah surprised Michael with news they had been hoping for years. "I'm Mike," she said, her eyes shining with happiness. "I'm pregnant." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Michael felt a surge of emotion so strong he could barely breathe. Mrs. Anderson's words echoed in his mind. "The child you so desire is on the way." "Oh, Sarah," he exclaimed, wrapping her in his arms, tears of joy streaming down his face. "Oh, it's a miracle." In the months that followed, as they watched Sarah's belly grow, Michael often found himself thinking of Mrs. Anderson. He tried to find her several times, eager to share the good news, but she had disappeared as mysteriously as she had appeared. The house where Michael had seen the childhood photos was now empty, as if it had never been lived in. The mystery of Mrs. Anderson remained unresolved, but her impact on Michael's life was undeniable. The song "Y Lindo Amor" became a hymn in their home, a constant reminder of the love, faith, and miracles that shaped their lives. On a quiet night, months later, Michael rocked his newborn son, humming softly, "Lindo amor, meu bem querer, és minha luz, meu viver." His eyes filled with tears of gratitude. Looking out the baby's room window, he saw a star shining brightly in the night sky. For a moment, Michael was sure that Mrs. Anderson, his guardian angel, was smiling down at them from somewhere. And so, in New Haven, a new story of love and family began, woven with threads of mystery, faith, and destiny. Michael Thompson, the boy found on the side of the road, was now a complete man, blessed with Sarah's love and the miracle of their child. The future, once uncertain, now gleamed with promises of joy and discovery, illuminated by the eternal melody of a beautiful love. And today, as the sun sets over New Haven, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, I can't help but reflect on Michael Thompson's extraordinary journey. His story reminds us that life is a complex tapestry, woven with threads of mystery, love, and destiny. Sometimes, it is the most unexpected encounters that shape our path, leading us to profound discoveries about ourselves and the world around us. Michael's saga teaches us that love, whether it's familial, romantic, or even from enigmatic strangers, has the power to transform lives. It reminds us that faith, even in the face of the inexplicable, can guide us through the darkest storms to a bright dawn. And perhaps most importantly, the story shows us that each of us carries within us unexplored potential, an untold story waiting to unfold. Sometimes, we just need a gentle reminder, a familiar song, a kind face, a surprising revelation to reconnect with our true essence and purpose. Dear viewer, if this story touched your heart, if it sparked reflections about your own journey, I would be immensely grateful if you subscribed to our channel and left a like on this video. Your support allows us to continue sharing these narratives that make us laugh, cry, and above all, feel deeply human. Thank you sincerely for taking the time to follow this story. Your presence and engagement are what give life to these words, transforming them from mere letters on a screen into shared experiences that connect us across time and space. Stay tuned. Our next story promises to be equally captivating, filled with thrilling twists and touching moments that will make your heart race. Until then, keep your eyes and heart open to the little miracles of everyday life. You never know when a beautiful love might cross your path and change your life forever. Thank you so much, and see you in the next story.